Peter Thiel turned $500,000 into more than $1 billion on Facebook. He co-founded PayPal, and he wrote 0 to 1. That is the version of Peter Thiel that Silicon Valley wants you to remember. The real story is different. The vice president of the United States is a man Peter Thiel hired in 2015. The White House AI czar is his old college roommate. But that is not even the most interesting part of the story. By the end of this video, you're going to see one specific decision that Thiel made in 1999 that legally turns billions of dollars into tax-free wealth. I promise you've never seen anything like this before. Phase 1. The move that built everything. When Thiel was a 19-year-old philosophy sophomore at Stanford, he started a college newspaper called the Stanford Review. The Review was a first prototype of a system that Thiel would run for the rest of his life. Networks compound faster than capital. 3 of the people who worked on the Stanford Review with him would later become his co-founders, his employees, and his political appointees. One of them, David Sachs, just took a job with the White House as Donald Trump's AI and crypto czar. That is how the Thiel machine works. He does not hire strangers. He builds people for 30 years and then deploys them. After Stanford, Thiel did what every brilliant student was supposed to do. He went to Stanford Law School, got the JD, clerked for a federal judge, took a stab at Sullivan & Cromwell, one of the most prestigious corporate law firms in America. He lasted all but 7 months. He had said publicly that he quit out of boredom. Thiel was not bored by the work. He was bored by being a small piece of someone else's machine. So he left to build his own. Phase 2, the first $100 million deal. In '96, Thiel started a small investment fund called Thiel Capital. 2 years later, in December '98, he co-founded Confinity with Max Levchin and Luke Nosek. The original idea was security software for the Palm Pilot. It almost failed. The team built an email-based payments feature as a side project. Nobody thought it was important, but eBay sellers started using it spontaneously. The team noticed, killed the Palm Pilot business, and went all in on email payment. That product became PayPal. In March 2000, PayPal merged with X.com, an online banking startup run by a 28-year-old, Elon Musk. 6 months later, the board fired Musk while he was on his honeymoon and made Peter Thiel the CEO. In February 2002, PayPal went public. In October that same year, eBay bought the company for $1.5 billion. Thiel had 3.7% stake. He walked away with about $55 million in direct proceeds and about $100 million total once you count the IPO sales. The 20-plus people who worked at PayPal in the early days went on to build YouTube, LinkedIn, Yelp, Tesla, SpaceX, and dozens of other companies. The press calls them the PayPal mafia. After a $1.5 billion exit, almost any other founder would have retired or invested passively. Thiel did the opposite. He treated the PayPal alumni as a permanent infrastructure asset. Every one of them became a node in a network Thiel could activate later. Most people miss this when they study Peter Thiel. By 2003, Thiel had around $100 million in liquid capital, a network of 20 future billionaires, and a thesis: monopolies were the source of all wealth in tech. But while the PayPal mafia was changing the internet, Thiel was running 3 bets at once. One of them almost destroyed him. One of them returned 2,000 times his money, and one of them, the smallest, was the most important. That is the one nobody's paying attention to. Phase 3, the bet that almost broke him. In 2002, Thiel launched Clarium Capital, a global macro hedge fund seeded with about $10 million of his PayPal money. His thesis: the US economy was about to face a serious crisis. He bet on commodities and energy. And for 5 years straight, he was right. By early 2008, Clarium had grown to $7.2 billion in assets under management, and Thiel was being talked about as the next great macro investor. Then the wheels came off. In 2008, Clarium lost 4.5%. 2009, it lost 25%. In 2010, it lost 23%. 3 straight years of losses, and the fund collapsed by 90%. By 2011, the assets under management had fallen to somewhere between 350 and 680 million. The contrarian genius blew up his hedge fund in spectacular fashion. He predicted the crisis and then got the recovery completely wrong. But while Clarium was being built and dismantled, 2 other things were happening that mattered far more. In August 2004, a friend introduced Thiel to a 19-year-old sophomore at Harvard who had built a college social network. They met for 2 hours. Thiel wrote a check for $500,000 and got 10.2% of the company at a $4.9 million post-money valuation. That company was called Facebook. By 2012, when Facebook went public, Thiel had sold most of his stake for over $1 billion, a 2,000 times return on his original check. But the third bet was the most important. In 2003, Thiel co-founded a software company. The product was an algorithm that could spot anomalies in massive datasets, the same approach PayPal used to catch credit card fraud. They named it Palantir after the all-seeing stones in Lord of the Rings. Thiel and Founders Fund put in roughly $30 million in early capital, but the more interesting check came from somewhere else. $2 million from a venture firm called Thiel. Thiel is the CIA's venture capital arm. The $2 million is not about money. Thiel had $100 million in his own pocket. He could have funded Palantir himself. He took the Thiel check because the investment gave Palantir Intelligence community credibility, direct relationships with government data systems. Thiel does not buy products, he buys access. And he is patient enough to wait years for that access to compound. That $2 million CIA check unlocked $968 million in additional contract revenue 22 years later. That is what access looks like when you give it 22 years to mature. But to scale the system, Thiel needed an institutional engine. If you're following along, you already know this channel breaks down what billionaires actually built, not what they tell you they built. If that's the kind of analysis you want more of, hit subscribe. Now, let me show you how Thiel turned his biggest failure into the most efficient Silicon Valley venture fund in history. Phase 4, the Founders Fund, cornering the market. Here's the lesson that Clarium taught him. Public macro bets are too volatile. Concentrated private bets in companies you can directly influence give you control over the variables that actually matter. That is the entire thesis of Founders Fund. In 2005, Thiel co-founded the firm with two PayPal alumni, Ken Howery and Luke Nosek. The first fund raised $50 million. Founders Fund went after hard tech, aerospace, defense, biotech, and energy. In 2008, SpaceX was 3 failed Falcon 1 launches deep and weeks from bankruptcy. Most investors would not return Musk's calls. Founders Fund, they went on to invest $671 million. By 2025, SpaceX will be valued between $800 billion and $2 trillion in private secondary markets. But here's the proof of how the engine actually works. The Wall Street Journal documented that Founders Fund's fourth round, raised in 2011, returned $4.60 for every dollar invested. The industry average was $2.11. That is more than double the benchmark. In 2014, Thiel published 0 to 1, based on his Stanford lectures. The book sold millions of copies and became required reading for an entire generation. Founders who admired Thiel's framework preferentially sought him out for capital. They offered Founders Fund favorable terms because his name on the cap table was worth more than the money. The intellectual brand created proprietary deal flow that no other VC could replicate. Then he scaled it. In 2011, Thiel launched the Thiel Fellowship. He paid 23 and unders $200,000 to drop out of college and build a company. By 2024, the program had funded 291 fellows who built 11 plus unicorns worth over $100 billion combined. Notable alumni include Dylan Field, who built Figma, Vitalik Buterin, who built Ethereum, and Lucy Guo, who co-founded Scale AI. The fellowship does not take equity. People assume that means it is a philanthropy. Look again. The fellowship is the cheapest deal flow funnel in venture capital. Every fellow becomes a Founders Fund prospect. Every fellow who fails enters the broader Thiel network. By 2025, Founders Fund managed around $17 billion. They closed a $4.6 billion growth round in April 25 and were closing a $6 billion fund in March 26. In February 2026, they co-led Anthropic's $30 billion round at a $380 billion valuation, while putting roughly $1 billion into OpenAI at the same time. But the brand and the network engine was only half the system. The other half was political. In 2016, Peter Thiel did something no other major Silicon Valley figure was willing to do. He bet on Donald Trump. He donated about $1.25 million to pro-Trump groups, he spoke at the National Republican Convention, and he became the first openly gay person to address the RNC in that role. After Trump won, he served on the transition team. Watch the third pattern click into place here. Thiel is a self-described libertarian who has written extensively about the dangers of state power. At the same time, his largest company makes 80% of its revenue from government contracts. The tech press treated the Trump bet as ideological. It was an investment. A Trump administration committed to expanded surveillance, immigration enforcement, and military spending was directly beneficial to Palantir's business. The $1.25 million was a venture check on a political asset that, if it paid off, would generate hundreds of millions in contract revenue. But the bigger bet had started 5 years earlier. In 2011, Thiel gave a lecture at Yale Law School. A second-year law student named James Donald Vance attended. Vance later said that the lecture changed his worldview, and Thiel started mentoring sponsoring him. In 2015, Thiel hired Vance as a partner at Mithril Capital, his growth stage venture firm. In 2021, after Trump lost, Thiel personally arranged a meeting between Vance, who had been publicly critical of Trump, and Trump himself at Mar-a-Lago. In 2022, Vance ran for U.S. Senate in Ohio. Thiel cut a single check for $15 million, supporting him. $15 million for one Senate primary. That is venture scale capital deployed into a human asset. Vance won the primary and then won the general, and then in 2024, Trump picked him as his running mate. In January 2025, J.D. Vance became the vice president of the United States of America. Look at the timeline. Thiel met Vance in 2011. He spent 14 years training him, employing him, funding his fund, brokering his political relationships, and finally writing a $15 million check. The check was not the investment. The 14 years was the investment. Within weeks of Vance's inauguration, Bloomberg reported that more than a dozen people with direct ties to Thiel were folded into the Trump administration. David Sachs, his old Stanford Review collaborator and PayPal co-founder, became the White House AI and crypto czar from 1987 to the White House office in 2025, 38 years later. Now, look at Palantir. Remember that $2 million check? Here's the payoff. In 2009, Palantir had $44 million in federal contracts. By 2025, that number had hit $970 million. The steepest acceleration happened during both Trump administrations. Palantir's stock appreciated 1,700% in 3 years, and the 26 revenue guidance is over $7 billion. Most billionaires build companies. Thiel built a system that uses the US government as one of his distribution channels. But every empire needs a vault. Thiel built his vault in 1999, and the vault opens in April of 2027. We're less than a year away. Phase 6, the 1999 billion dollar loophole. This is what we promised at the start of the video. The single decision in '99 that legally turns billions of dollars into completely tax-free wealth. Before PayPal went public, Thiel did something almost no one knew until ProPublica exposed it in June of 21. He put PayPal shares into a self-directed Roth IRA at a fractional pre-IPO valuation, pennies on what they would be worth. A Roth IRA is a retirement account, the kind designed by Congress to help middle-class Americans save a few $100,000 over a working lifetime. The contribution cap is a few $1,000s a year. Thiel found a way to put pre-IPO equity inside that wrapper at the lowest legal valuation, and then watched it appreciate. By 2018, ProPublica reported that account was worth approximately $5 billion. With appreciation since then, the current estimate is $5 to $8 billion. Every dollar inside that account is legally tax-free after April 27. That is when Thiel turns 59 and a half, the age the IRS allows penalty-free withdrawal. This is the largest individual tax shield ever documented in American history. The self-described libertarian who spent 30 years writing about the dangers of state power now has the largest private financial interest in expanding it. And now is the part where I ask you to subscribe. The next breakdown is already in production. I'm Buster. Peace.